Is the United States a terrorist state? If you're black in this country, we're going to get to that in a little bit. Interesting, essentially, debate this morning on BBC between Jesse Jackson and a 40-year veteran of the New York Police Department that I want to share with you. But first, Mike Papantonio, America's Lawyer, is on the line with us. ringofireradio.com is the website. Pap, welcome.
Tom, how are you?
Great to have you with us. The Republican, I saw this, Steve Rosenfeld wrote this piece for Alternet, and the headline is, I'd like to just, get your thoughts on Tour of the GOP 2016 Posse, a Noah's Ark of right-wing specimens.
Yeah, simply put, the clown car comes to town.
There you go.
The problem with modern American politics, Tom, is that George W. Bush lowered the bar so low that now we're being inundated with candidates like Ted Cruz and Rand Paul and people who 20 years ago honestly wouldn't have gotten past a primary in a city council election. But with what George Bush did, now they seem to be viable candidates, at least within their niche. But now we're serving these same people that couldn't get elected honestly in a city council meeting 20 years ago. They're serving in the Senate and they're serving in the House. And they honestly believe that they're smart enough and that they're disciplined enough to lead this country as President of the United States. But, if you think back to the elections in 2003 and 2004, it was partially the media's fault. When Bush ran his dumbed-down campaigns, we started hearing the media ask questions like, which candidate would you rather have a beer with? Which candidate would you rather spend time with? And we were told by that idiotic, just dysfunctional corporate media that we should vote for the average Joe. As a matter of fact, they even invented Joe the Plumber for that purpose. And so the media has done most of this, and this is what we have to live with now. The corporate media has to live with this clown car that is now rolling into town for every presidential election, filled up with Ted Cruz quality Republican candidates. But, the notion of an Ivy League educated intellectual is just too offensive for the corporate media.
Yeah. I have been saying for some time that in the Republican Party there are basically three kinds of people. And it's true to some extent in the Democratic Party as well, although I think the Progressive Caucus, indicates that there's still some good Democrats. But basically, rich people who fund the Republican Party and big corporations. There are the paid shills for the rich people who, everybody knows who they are, I guess. And there are the suckers. And the job of the paid shills is to keep the suckers coming in, and they feed the suckers things like religion and guns and God and gays and stuff like that, because it's really all about the money, but you can't tell the suckers that. Am I making sense here? And if so...
No, you're making perfect sense. But in all, yes, there is this division, Tom. But unfortunately, it's bigger than just the Republican Party. If you think about, and here's why I say that, one of the biggest attacks, for example, on both Al Gore and John Kerry was that they were too smart. I mean, we both listened to that and we went, really, what an incredible attack, that they actually have some character and that they actually have some education and that they have maybe a plan. And they were intellectuals, and somehow the American people believed that smart and sophisticated individuals, it was a bad thing. But how did that happen? It happened because the media let it happen. And it wasn't just within the Republican Party. We started seeing Democrats jump on the same bandwagon, and we started seeing the Southern Democrat that was elected, he or she had to play the same game. So today we have leaders in Washington who really don't know how stupid they are. Because in relationship to the rest of the country, they have convinced themselves that they're brilliant.
Or they've convinced themselves that they've got enough money behind them that they can hire brilliant people to do things for them, and they can be a good figurehead like Ronald Reagan was.
Yeah. Well, but Tom, have you ever remembered a time, though, when your presidential candidate doesn't believe in science? They literally reject science.
Yeah.
They're afraid to talk about science. They don't believe in acting like sophisticated adults. And they believe that the notion of perpetuating what they are and what they stand for is to undermine the office of the President of the United States. I can even count. So this lack of no adult being home, maturity in Washington, D.C. among Republicans, we're now saying this is now a campaign feature. This is sellable. We want a Ted Cruz. We want a Rand Paul. We want a Walker type who will say the stupidest things. And the average American said, and it's not just big money, Tom. We have to be honest. It's the average American says, yeah, I can relate to that guy because he sounds like he might not be as educated as me the same way. So, I mean, it's not just the media. The media's perpetuated it, but it's the person out there that says, yeah, this is a good thing to have somebody so woefully stupid that they don't even understand evolution or want to admit that evolution is reality. They won't admit that the planet is melting. They won't admit that trickle-down economics is a total lie. They won't admit it because they understand that that's what the average American can easily be fed and certainly would be willing to believe. So it is the dumbing down of America. It's anti-intellectualism at its very worst. That is the cadre of candidates that have rolled into Washington, D.C. on behalf of the Republicans.
Absolutely right. And yet at the same time, it seems to me like there's something cyclical to this. If you go back to the Scopes monkey trial in, what is it, the 1920s or 30s, whenever that was, you had, again, conservative politicians. Back then, the conservatives more often than not were Democrats rather than Republicans, but you had the conservative politicians denying evolution, passing laws forbidding the teaching of evolution in our schools. I mean, this went back to the mid-19th century. And like you say, today they're continuing to, and yet in the middle there was this kind of golden period in the United States in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s where Jack Kennedy said we're going to send a man to the moon, and Dwight Eisenhower said we're going to build this incredible infrastructure, and we're going to look to science for our future. And
right.
and what is the lever that's turning that cycle?
Okay, two things. First of all, your comment about the Scopes trial. I wrote a book about Clarence Darrow, and the thing that really concerned Clarence Darrow wasn't so much the loss of that trial. He understood that more was at stake than the loss of that trial, and he did lose that trial. People don't know that part of the story, but he did lose. But his fear was that trial was a microcosm for the dumbing down of sophistication and intelligence of America, and what he was concerned about was that is an introduction, the first important fascism. So if you go back, and then the second part of what you said, if you go back and you read Pearl's book called Nixon Land, it's a very, very interesting read. It's a very important piece of work. And what he says in there is that the Nixon years changed this notion of kind of a golden society. Changed the Camelot notion. What it did is it started taking advantage of fear. We had people in the streets that were protesting. They were protesting Vietnam. You had this era that they called the Hippie Era, and really all it was people experimenting with different things that seemed abnormal, and it scared mom and pop. That group called the Greatest Generation, the group that had fought the Second World War, and now they were retired, and it scared the hell out of them. And what ended up happening, you had this dramatic backlash, and we said we can't be great thinkers, we can't be free thinkers, we can't have a Camelot. Our security's at risk if we do that, and nothing has changed since then.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it. Mike Papantonio, America's attorney, host of Ring of Fire Radio, ringofireradio.com. Thanks, Pap. Always great talking with you.
Thank you, Tom.
We'll be back 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And be sure to check out everything that Mike Papantonio is doing over at ringofireradio.com. And welcome back, Juris Dr. Papantonio. You're still here?
I am. How are you doing?
Good. So what's coming up on Free Speech TV this Sunday on Ring of Fire?
we've got some great stories lined up. It's always the backstory, as you know. It's not the headline stories. It's the backstory behind the headlines. I've got Howard Nation's going to tell us why the FDA is dragging its feet on this new rule that would force generic prescription drugs to carry the same warnings that their brand counterparts have to carry. The delay
you mean they don't?
They do not. They have an exemption. If you have a product, for example, when I finished the Yaz case, or the Pradax is a great example. You finish these cases and you see where the company clearly knew that the drug was killing people by the hundreds. And they have, the brand company is then forced to put a warning on, but when it goes generic, the generic company says, we don't want to have to mess with all that. We want to put that responsibility onto the doctor, so they don't have to give the same warning, like this product will kill you, that the brand people have to give. And it's being held up by the FDA because the FDA is wholly owned by the drug industry. I'm going to have Matt Filipovich. He hosts the Matt Filipovich Show. He's going to tell us about the recent religious liberty laws that are designed to allow businesses to discriminate based on religious beliefs. I'm going to have progressive radio and talk show host David Pakman to explain President Obama's proposal to provide 2 years of cost-free community college to American citizens and what impact that might have. David DeSalle, he's going to join us to talk about why Democrats are joining up with Wall Street to destroy public worker pensions. They are in with both feet. This is a very scary story. There is no protection left. Democrats are part of the destruction now, too. And Attorney Charles Meltmar is going to explain how a lack of oversight for hospice care is killing seniors by the dozens every day all over this country.
Wow.
But they're all backstories, Tom. They're not headline stories. That too often we try to do what you do, and that is not simply talk about what did the headline say, but more what does the headline mean? What is the story behind that headline? And I think that has kind of been our brand with it's always been our brand, really, with Ring of Fire.
Oh, you've always done a brilliant job of that, and it's really important stuff. I'm astonished at that. You know, if I pick up a prescription for a drug and it's a brand name drug, it's going to have a label that says, you know, don't take this drug if you're also taking XYZ, you know, because it might kill you, or just, you know, don't take this drug if you have these, or here's the dangers, or whatever. But if I pick up the exact same compound, just with a different brand name attached to it, that is the generic version, there's no warning. I have to rely on my doctor to say that, and the doctor very often will write the prescription for the brand name, assuming, you know, that I'll get the warning. He doesn't want to spend 15 minutes with me explaining the whole thing, and you go to the pharmacy and they fill it with a generic.
Yeah. When you get a brand name, you're also going to get a package insert that's going to tell you that this product can cause your kidneys to stop. They can make you go blind. It can cause a stroke.
Right.
You're going to get a package insert that tells you all that. The generic industry has made sure that they don't have to do that. So what's happening now is the brand name people are buying up the generic companies, moving it to generic to where they can sell the product they know is killing people without any downside. They can't be sued because of the lack of warning for the generic. And obviously people want to use generic because they're less expensive, and most insurance companies are going to demand generic. So the insurance company ultimately is demanding that you use a product that maybe can kill you or paralyze you or stop your heart or stop your kidneys without giving you any warning.
Astonishing.
And that's the reality with the FDA.
Astonishing. RingofFireRadio.com. Thank you, Pap.